The night began with glitter, but it ended in blood. Inside a grand Manhattan penthouse, the city lights sparkled like diamonds against the glass walls. Victor Hayes, a real estate millionaire worshipped by society, was hosting a dinner for his closest business partners. He laughed, raised glasses of wine, and spoke of empire and power as if he owned the world. To them, he was a charming man, a visionary who built towers from nothing. To Elena, his 6-month pregnant wife, he was a monster, hiding behind a perfect smile. She carried a tray of food into the dining room, her hands trembling under the weight of crystal dishes. No one noticed the bruise faintly blooming on her wrist, hidden beneath her sleeve. No one cared that her smile was brittle, her steps unsteady. To Victor's guests, she was merely decoration, a dutiful wife, a silent shadow in his kingdom. But silence has limits. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Elena whispered softly, "Victor, please, we need to talk. I can't keep pretending." Her voice shook, but she gathered courage for the life growing inside her. She hoped, maybe for the last time, that there was a shred of love left in him. Victor turned, his expression twisting into something cruel. "You embarrass me in front of my friends," he snarled, stepping closer. "Do you think anyone cares what you feel? You're nothing without me, nothing." Her heart pounded. Fear clashed with fury. "I'm carrying your child," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Don't you understand? He deserves a father who—" The blow came faster than she could finish. His hand struck her face with brutal force. She stumbled, clutching her belly. "Stop!" she screamed, but her cry only fueled his rage. He shoved her against the marble counter, his words venom. "That baby won't save you. You're weak, Elena. Pathetic." Her vision blurred. Pain shot through her body. The sound of her own heartbeat echoed in her ears, louder than the storm rising outside the penthouse windows. She fell, the world crashing into darkness as her body hit the floor. Hours later, a neighbor heard the faint sound of breaking glass and called for help. By the time paramedics arrived, Elena was barely breathing. Blood stained the hem of her dress. Her unborn child clung to life inside her womb. The city, vast and indifferent, glittered on. Victor? He poured himself another drink, staring out over the skyline as if nothing had happened. To him, this was control. To her brothers, Mateo and Diego Torres, this would soon become war. Because the moment they heard what Victor had done, they swore an oath no court could silence. He will pay. And when two brothers rise to protect their sister, the city itself will tremble. The city saw Victor Hayes as the perfect husband. Tall, polished, always dressed in the sharpest suits, he was the picture of success. Whenever cameras flashed, he knew exactly how to smile, how to rest his hand on Elena's shoulder, and whisper the kind of words that made people swoon. "My wife is my greatest blessing," he told reporters at a charity gala just weeks earlier. His arm had been wrapped around her as if she were a rare jewel. The photographs appeared in glossy magazines, headlines praising him as the model family man. But behind those closed penthouse doors, promises turned to poison. In the early months of their marriage, Elena had believed his words. He showered her with roses, whispered about building a family, and promised her safety. He once held her hand at a candlelit dinner and said, "You will never cry because of me, Elena. I swear it." She wanted to believe him. She had grown up with so little, working as a schoolteacher, dreaming of a home filled with warmth. Victor seemed to offer that dream. For a while, she convinced herself the anger in his eyes was just stress, that the harsh words were just frustration. But lies always rot from the inside. The cracks began slowly. A cold glance at a dinner table, an insult slipped between smiles, a hand gripping her arm too tightly when no one was watching. Elena swallowed her pain, whispering to herself that love was sacrifice, that one day he would soften. But Victor was not softening, he was sharpening. His career soared, his wealth doubled, and with every success came a darker hunger for control. When Elena became pregnant, she thought things would change. She imagined Victor kneeling beside her, resting his ear against her belly, speaking to their unborn child. For a brief time, he played the role, rubbing her shoulders, buying tiny clothes, kissing her stomach. He even promised her one night, "This baby will make me a better man." It was a lie wrapped in silk. Weeks later, he came home late, smelling of perfume she didn't wear. His phone buzzed with messages he wouldn't let her see. When she asked gently, "Where were you?" he smiled that public smile, cold and distant. "Business dinner," he lied, pouring himself whiskey. She wanted to believe him, but the lipstick stain on his collar screamed the truth louder than any denial. The betrayal burned, but worse was his cruelty. Whenever Elena showed fear or sadness, Victor weaponized it. "Do you think anyone will believe you?" he sneered one evening after an argument. "I'm the millionaire. You're just a school teacher who got lucky." His voice was sharp, cutting deeper than his fists ever could. Elena learned to cry in silence. At night, she pressed her face into the pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. She wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering lullabies to a baby who hadn't yet entered the world. She clung to hope. The faint idea that maybe once the child was born, Victor's heart would change. But hope is fragile, and Victor enjoyed shattering it. On the morning of her 6th month, he placed his hand on her stomach, looked into her eyes, and said, "I will protect you both forever." It should have been a promise of love. Instead, it became the cruelest joke of all, because just hours later, his rage would put her in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. And while Victor polished his public mask, Elena's brothers were about to strip it off, piece by piece. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside the Hayes penthouse. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, thunder rumbling over Manhattan. But the loudest sound inside that luxury prison was Victor's rage. Elena had tried one more time to reach him. She set dinner on the table, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Victor, we can't live like this anymore. I'm scared for the baby." Her voice was small, fragile, but honest. She wasn't accusing him, she was begging. Victor's eyes, bloodshot from whiskey, narrowed into slits. "Scared?" he repeated, his tone mocking. "You should be scared of losing me. Without me, you're nothing." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe there was still a trace of the man she once loved, but all she saw was a stranger, cold, cruel, and merciless. "I don't care about the money," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I just want peace, Victor. I just want our child to grow up safe." The words landed like sparks on gasoline. His chair screeched back. In one swift, terrifying motion, Victor grabbed the crystal glass from the table and hurled it against the wall. Shards exploded across the marble floor, glittering like deadly stars. Elena flinched, instinctively wrapping her arms around her belly. "Stop!" she cried, but her desperation only fueled his fury. "You embarrass me," he roared, towering over her. "You think you can lecture me? In my house?" His hand shot out, seizing her arms so tightly she gasped. She tried to pull away, her voice cracking. "Victor, please, not the baby." But mercy was a word Victor had erased from his vocabulary. His slap came fast and brutal. The sound echoed through the penthouse, louder than the thunder outside. Elena's head snapped to the side, her vision blurring with white light. Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself to stay standing, to shield the fragile life inside her. "Victor, please," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "He's your son." Those words should have softened him. Instead, they ignited him. With a growl, he shoved her backward. Her body collided with the edge of the marble counter. Pain shot through her ribs, her breath stolen by the impact. She clutched her belly, sobbing. "No, please, not my baby." But Victor was beyond reason. His fists, once instruments of power in boardrooms, now became weapons against the woman carrying his child. Blow after blow rained down. Elena tried to shield herself, but each strike drove her deeper into darkness. Her cries grew faint, her strength slipping away. Finally, one merciless shove sent her crumpling onto the glass-strewn floor. She lay there, motionless, blood pooling beneath her. The storm outside roared, but inside silence settled. Victor stood above her, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temple. He stared at what he had done, not with regret, but with satisfaction. In his twisted mind, he had taught her a lesson. Hours later, neighbors reported strange crashes and muffled screams. Paramedics broke into the penthouse to find Elena unconscious, her face bruised, her body limp, her pulse faint. They rushed her to the hospital, the red sirens slicing through the city night. Inside the ambulance, her hand twitched weakly against her swollen belly. The baby's heartbeat fluttered on the monitor, fragile but alive. Back in the penthouse, Victor poured himself another drink, staring out at the skyline as though nothing had happened. To the world, he was still the millionaire everyone admired. But across the city, her brothers Mateo and Diego received the call that would change everything. And when they saw their sister broken in a hospital bed, they made a vow. Victor Hayes had signed his own death sentence. The ambulance tore through Manhattan streets, red lights flashing against the rain-soaked pavement. Inside, Elena's fragile body lay strapped to the gurney. Her face was swollen, her lips cracked, blood trickling from a cut above her eyebrow. One paramedic pressed a mask over her nose while another shouted, her pressures dropping, fetal heartbeat unstable. The sound of the monitor was a cruel reminder. 2 lives hung on the edge of death. At Lenox Hill Hospital, chaos erupted the moment the doors burst open. Nurses rushed Elena into the trauma ward, calling out vitals as her stretcher wheeled down the corridor. 27 years old, 6 months pregnant, sustained blunt force trauma, patient unresponsive. And waiting at the entrance, breathless and wide-eyed, was Diego Torres. He had just finished his shift in the ER when his phone rang. The words still echoed in his ears. Your sister has been attacked. For a split second, Diego froze. The world blurred, and all he could hear was the faint memory of Elena's laughter when they were children. Then instinct took over. He sprinted down the hall, ripping on gloves and grabbing a gown. I'm her brother. Put me on the team. The attending physician glanced at him, then nodded. They needed every skilled hand. Inside the operating room, the scene was a storm. Elena's chest rose faintly beneath the oxygen mask, her belly trembling with each shallow breath. Diego's throat tightened, but he forced his emotions down. This was not the time to be a brother. He had to be a doctor. BP is 70/40, a nurse cried. Start fluids. Prepare for possible emergency C-section, the attending barked. Diego's hands trembled for a heartbeat. The idea of losing Elena or the baby was unbearable. But then, like in combat medicine drills, his focus sharpened. Check internal bleeding, monitor fetal heart rate closely. We don't cut unless we have to. The minutes crawled. Tubes were inserted, blood transfusions prepared, monitors screaming warnings. Sweat dripped from Diego's forehead as he worked alongside his colleagues, his voice steady but his heart shattering inside. Every beat of the monitor was a lifeline he clung to. Heartbeat stabilizing, the nurse finally said. Relief flickered, but it was fragile. Elena was still unconscious, her pulse dangerously weak. Diego leaned close to her ear, whispering through his mask, Don't you dare leave us, Elena. Your son needs you. We need you. Hours passed like years. At last, the attending sighed, pulling back. She's critical, but stable. For now, we'll keep her in a medically induced coma. The baby's still holding on. Diego pulled off his gloves, his hands shaking. He stepped back, staring at his sister lying pale and still beneath the hospital lights. A wave of grief and rage surged inside him. He wanted to scream, to break something, but he held it in. There was someone else who needed to hear the truth first. In the waiting room, Mateo Torres stood rigid, his military posture unbroken, but his eyes stormy with fear. The moment Diego walked out, Mateo's voice cracked. How bad? Diego swallowed hard. She's alive. Barely. The baby's still fighting too. His jaw clenched, his voice breaking for the first time. Victor did this. Silence hung heavy between them. Then Mateo's fists curled, veins bulging in his arms. His voice was low, dangerous. Then Victor Hayes just declared war. Diego placed a trembling hand on his brother's shoulder. We'll do this smart, for Elena, for her child. Mateo's eyes burned with fire. No court, no lawyer, no amount of money is going to save him. He thinks he's untouchable? Let's show him what happens when he touches family. At that moment, in the sterile corridors of Lenox Hill, 2 brothers made a vow that would terrify an entire city. Victor Hayes had built an empire on money and lies, but now he had awakened something far stronger. Blood and vengeance. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the storm inside Mateo Torres had only begun. The former Marine stood at the window of the hospital waiting room, watching New York wake up in streaks of gray. His reflection stared back. Hard eyes, clenched jaw, a man forged in battlefields who thought he had already seen the worst of humanity. But nothing he had faced overseas compared to the sight of his sister lying unconscious, her fragile body wrapped in tubes and wires. He had rushed to the hospital overnight after Diego's call. The image of Elena's broken body burned into his memory, fueling something he hadn't felt in years, pure, uncontrollable rage. Mateo turned as Diego walked in, still in scrubs, exhaustion pulling at his face. She made it through the night, Diego said softly. She's holding on, Matteo, but she's not out of danger. Matteo's fists tightened. She shouldn't even be in this fight. He put her there. His voice cracked like thunder. That bastard beat her, our Elena. And he thinks he'll walk away? Diego placed a steadying hand on his brother's shoulder. I know what you're thinking, but we need to be careful. Victor Hayes has power, money, lawyers. I don't care if he has the president on speed dial. Matteo snapped. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. He hurt family, and when someone hurts family, they answer to me. For years, Matteo had buried himself in discipline, order, and service. The Marine Corps had taught him to fight for his country, but nothing had prepared him to fight for his sister's life. Yet as he stood in that hospital, he knew this was his new mission. And it was personal. The Torres brothers sat together, the silence between them heavy but unbreakable. Finally, Matteo leaned forward, his voice calm but dangerous. We need to build a case, not just in court, but in the streets, in the city. We need to show the world what he did. Diego nodded reluctantly. Sophia might help. She's still practicing law. She hates men like Victor. Sophia Carter, Elena's childhood friend, now a rising human rights attorney, was exactly the ally they needed. But even Sophia's skills would be tested against Victor's army of lawyers and his polished public image. To the world, Victor was still a dazzling millionaire. Matteo wasn't naive. He knew this war wouldn't be fought with bullets. It would be fought with strategy, black exposure, and fear. And he was ready to use every ounce of his training to dismantle Victor's empire brick by brick. When Matteo finally entered Elena's hospital room, the sight cut him deeper than any knife. She lay motionless, machines beeping steadily, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. He pulled up a chair, lowering his broad frame beside her bed. For a long moment, he said nothing, just held her limp hand in his. Then his voice came, low and fierce. I don't know if you can hear me, Lena, but I swear to you, I won't rest until he pays. For every bruise on your face, for every tear you shed, for every moment of fear you lived through, he will pay. That's a promise from your brother. His eyes burned, but he didn't let the tears fall. Instead, he kissed her forehead gently, then stood, steel in his spine. He looked back at Diego. We start tonight, Diego exhaled slowly. Then tonight, the war begins. And as the first rays of morning sun pierced the hospital blinds, two brothers stood united. One with the skill of medicine, one with the discipline of war. Together they would become Elena's shield and Victor Hayes' nightmare. The city had no idea what was coming, but soon everyone would know the name Torres. The quiet hum of machines in Elena's hospital room was a cruel soundtrack to the storm Matteo and Diego were planning. But if they were to strike Victor Hayes, they needed proof, evidence strong enough to pierce the armor of his wealth and reputation. That's why, 3 nights later, they sat across from Sophia Carter in her modest law office downtown. Sophia had grown up with Elena. She remembered the shy girl with ink-stained fingers who used to write poems about hope. Now she stared at the case file in front of her, her eyes dark with fury. I knew Victor was arrogant, she said, flipping through the documents. But this is criminal. On the desk lay receipts, photographs, and text messages Sophia had pulled together in just a few days. She had contacts in the legal world, friends in the media, and more importantly, informants who whispered secrets when paid in the right currency. Loyalty, not money. She pushed a photo across the table. It showed Victor with a young model draped over his arm, taken at a private club known for discretion. He's been flaunting this mistress for nearly a year, Sophia said coldly. While Elena carried his child, he was parading another woman around behind closed doors. Matteo's jaw clenched. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the desk. I'll kill him, he muttered. Diego put a hand on his brother's shoulder. Not yet. We need to be smarter than him. Sophia continued. It's not just cheating. Look at these transfers. She spread out bank statements showing enormous wire payments to shell companies. Victor has been laundering money. He's hiding millions offshore. And guess what? Some of it is in the mistress's name. The brothers exchanged a look. This was bigger than personal betrayal. Victor's entire empire reeked of corruption. But the cruelest discovery came last. Sophia's voice softened, almost breaking. There are police reports, Matteo. Reports Elena filed years ago. Bruises, broken ribs, neighbors calling in noise complaints, and every single time, the reports disappeared. buried by his money, by his connections. Diego's stomach dropped. His sister had tried to escape long before this night, long before the coma. She had cried out for help, and the system had silenced her. Mateo slammed his fist against the desk, the sound echoing in the small office. He broke her once, and the world looked away. Not anymore. Sophia leaned forward, her voice sharp. If you go at him head-on, he'll crush you. But if we expose him publicly, strategically, we can bring him to his knees. We'll leak the mistress, the laundering, the police cover-ups. Piece by piece, we'll strip away his mask until the city sees him for what he is, a monster. For the first time, Diego's eyes glimmered with hope. So there's a way? Sophia nodded. There's always a way. But it will take risk and courage. And you need to be ready for him to strike back harder than ever. Mateo stood, towering over the desk, his voice steady but lethal. We've been ready since the night we saw Elena in that hospital bed. He thought he could bury the truth. We'll dig it up and bury him instead. Sophia closed the folder with finality. Then let's begin. Tomorrow, I'll make the first call to the press. The room fell silent, but beneath that silence was fire. Elena's brothers and her loyal friend had formed a pact. Victor Hayes had built his empire on lies, but those lies were about to turn into weapons against him. And when truth becomes a weapon, even the richest man in the city can bleed. Victor Hayes knew how to play the world like a violin. To the public, he was not a violent husband who left his pregnant wife in a coma. He was a grieving man, broken by tragedy, begging for sympathy. 3 days after Elena's hospitalization, Victor appeared on the steps of his penthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras. He wore a tailored black suit, a somber expression carefully painted on his face. My wife, he began, his voice low and trembling, is fighting for her life. Please keep her and our unborn child in your prayers. The cameras clicked furiously. His performance was flawless. He even clutched a framed photo of Elena, their wedding day smile frozen forever in time. She is the light of my life, Victor continued, letting his voice crack at just the right moment. I will never stop fighting for her. Reporters ate it up. Headlines the next morning screamed, "Devoted husband stands by wife in crisis." Social media flooded with praise for his strength. Behind the scenes, Victor was seething. In the privacy of his penthouse, he downed glass after glass of whiskey. His mistress curled on the couch like a smug cat. They believe me, he sneered, running a hand through his slicked back hair. The city pities me, and as long as they pity me, no one will dare accuse me. The mistress, Alice, smirked but hesitated. But what if your wife wakes up? What if she talks? Victor's smile turned sharp, cruel. Then I'll make sure she never does. While the city mourned with Victor, Elena's brothers watched his parade on television from the hospital waiting room. Mateo's fists tightened until his knuckles cracked. He's mocking us, he growled. Diego's jaw set hard. The world thinks he's a saint. We know he's a monster. We need proof, more than Sophia already has. Otherwise, no one will believe us. Meanwhile, Victor doubled down on his mask. He donated $500,000 to the hospital in honor of Elena, securing his name on a new wing. He hosted charity dinners, inviting politicians and celebrities, weaving a tale of devotion. The public adored him, but cracks began to show. Sophia's contacts in the press started leaking whispers, photos of Victor with Alice, rumors of shady business dealings. At first, they were dismissed as gossip. But when one tabloid published a blurry shot of Victor kissing Alice outside a nightclub, the city gasped. Victor reacted swiftly. He called a press conference. Alice hidden from sight and spoke with righteous indignation. These are lies meant to destroy a husband in pain. I will not be distracted from praying for my wife's recovery. He even wiped a fake tear from his eye. And once again, many believed him. That night, Sophia slammed her fist on her desk. He's twisting everything. He's winning the sympathy war. Mateo's eyes burned like fire. Then we stop playing defense. We go on the attack. Diego nodded, his voice heavy with determination. If Victor wants to play saint in public, let's rip off his halo in front of everyone. Victor Hayes thought he had fooled the city. But behind hospital walls, 3 people planned to crush his mask into dust. Because sooner or later, masks slip, and when his did, the world would see the devil underneath. The sterile hospital room smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped steadily, measuring every fragile breath Elena fought to take. The blinds were half open, letting in the weak glow of the city beyond. But inside, time seemed frozen. Their mother, Rosa Torres, sat at Elena's bedside, clutching her daughter's limp hand. Her wrinkled fingers trembled as she stroked Elena's knuckles, whispering prayers in Spanish, her voice cracking with every syllable. "Mi niña, mi angelito, please come back to us." Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling onto the white hospital sheets. Mateo stood at the foot of the bed, his body rigid, fists clenched so tightly the veins bulged in his forearms. He had seen men die on battlefields, but nothing prepared him for watching his sister. The gentle girl who once braided his hair when they were children, lying broken and silent. His chest heaved with restrained fury. He wanted to scream, to shatter the machines with his bare hands, to storm into Victor Hayes's penthouse and end him. But all he could do was stand there, powerless, burning inside. Diego leaned against the wall, his scrubs still stained from hours in surgery. He tried to remain composed, but the weight of helplessness crushed him. He was a doctor, trained to save lives. Yet, as her brother, every breath she struggled to take cut him in half. He had patched bullet wounds in emergency rooms, stopped hearts from failing in chaos, but watching Elena fight from a hospital bed was a torment like no other. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the machines. Then Rosa's voice broke the stillness. "Why her?" she whispered, almost to herself. "She gave him everything. She carried his child, and this is how he repays her." Her voice rose, shaky but filled with grief. "God forgive me, but I want him to suffer." Mateo stepped closer, placing a hand on their mother's shoulder. His voice was low, steady but dangerous. "He will. I swear it, Mama. He will." Rosa turned, her tear-filled eyes searching his. "Promise me, Mateo. Promise me you won't let him get away with this." Mateo's jaw tightened. He didn't hesitate. "I promise." The room went quiet again, but the weight of that vow hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Later that night, Mateo and Diego sat together in the dimly lit hospital chapel. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across the wooden pews. Diego rubbed his face, exhaustion etched into every line. "We can't keep this from her forever," he said softly. "If Elena wakes up, she'll know the trickster. About everything." Mateo's voice was hard as steel. "If she wakes up, she'll see him destroyed. That's the only truth that matters." Diego's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to remind Mateo of the risks of the law. But as he looked at his brother's eyes, eyes that once belonged to a soldier, now belonging to a brother with nothing left to lose, he stayed silent. The chapel door creaked open. Rosa entered quietly, her eyes red from crying. She sat between her sons, clutching her rosary. "We are all we have left," she whispered. "Family. If we break, she will never come back. Hold on to each other. Don't let him take more from us than he already has." The brothers exchanged a glance. For the first time, Mateo's anger softened. He reached for Diego's hand, then for their mother's. The three of them sat together, bound by grief, bound by love, bound by an oath stronger than any law. And in that silent chapel, a broken family found strength, not in justice but in vengeance, waiting to be born. The city glittered at night, oblivious to the war brewing in its shadows. From his penthouse balcony, Victor Hayes sipped bourbon, smiling at the lights of Manhattan as if the skyline itself bowed to him. He believed the world still adored him, that the mask he wore for the cameras was unbreakable. But across town, Mateo Torres was already sharpening his first strike. Inside a dim apartment lit only by a desk lamp, Mateo spread photographs across the table. Blurry shots of Victor with Alice, his mistress. Receipts. Sophia had uncovered showing offshore transfers. Notes scribbled in his own hand. Patterns, connections, weaknesses. To Mateo, this wasn't paperwork. It was a battle plan. Diego paced behind him, torn between fear and determination. "You can't just storm his life like it's Fallujah," Diego muttered. "This isn't a battlefield. It's New York City. There are laws." Mateo's eyes stayed locked on the photos. "Victor doesn't care about laws. He buys them. If we fight by the rules, we lose before the first punch." He slapped a photo down hard. "But if we make him bleed where it hurts, in his reputation, his power, his ego, that's a fight we can win." Sophia leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. "Then we start small. Leak just enough to raise questions. Don't expose everything at once. Make the city suspicious of him. When suspicion grows, his mask will crack on its own." Mateo's lips curved into a grim smile. "Good, Let's feed the city the first taste of his rot. That night, a journalist from a popular online outlet received an anonymous package. Inside were high-resolution photos of Victor Hayes kissing Alice outside a hotel, time-stamped just weeks before Elena's accident. No names, no explanations, just the truth in images. The story exploded by morning. Headlines screamed, "Millionaire's secret affair exposed." Social media buzzed with outrage. "How could he cheat on a wife in a coma?" people tweeted. "Is Victor Hayes really the saint he claims?" For the first time, cracks spread across Victor's carefully painted mask. But Victor was quick. At a press briefing that afternoon, he stood before cameras with crocodile tears, calling the photos doctored lies meant to tarnish him. "I am devoted to my wife and our unborn child," he insisted. "I won't let false accusations distract me from what matters, her recovery." His PR team clapped in the background, the performance almost convincing. Almost. Because while many still believed him, others started to doubt. The whispers grew louder. The perfect millionaire husband didn't look so perfect anymore. Watching from the hospital waiting room, Mateo's eyes narrowed as the TV replayed Victor's speech. "He's squirming," he said, voice low and certain. "Good, let him squirm." Diego wasn't convinced. "He's still winning, people still defend him. We need something stronger." Sophia nodded. "Don't worry, this was just the first shot. The city is watching now. When we drop the next bomb, no amount of money will shield him." Mateo leaned back, the glimmer of a soldier's fire in his eyes. "Then let's keep the pressure. Every lie he tells will rip apart. Every truth he hides will drag into the light, until he has nowhere left to run." In the distance, the city lights flickered, unaware that a war of shadows had begun. And Victor Hayes, for the first time in his life, had no idea that his empire was already crumbling under his feet. Sophia knew the city and its appetite for spectacle. If Victor could charm a crowd, the brothers needed to create a stage where charm would fail. She proposed a plan that was both risky and surgical. Expose Victor at the one place he loved most, the gleaming charity gala he would host to reclaim his saintly image and silence doubt. The invitation list read like a who's who of the skyline: CEOs, anchors, board members, politicians, and socialites who made headlines for waving big checks. Victor announced the benefit as a tribute to family and healing, promising donations and a new wing named after Elena. Cameras circled like sharks. This was the arena he wanted, the perfect place to perform remorse and seal public opinion. Sophia moved like an operative. She coordinated with the journalist who had published the affair photos and secured a small independent live feed crew willing to risk legal threats. She lined up witnesses, a former assistant with emails proving Victor ordered transfers to shell entities, a hotel manager who could confirm bookings for the mistress, and a discreet technician who could route a feed to the giant gala screens. Everything had to synchronize to the second. On the night of the gala, the ballroom was a pool of crystal and silk. Elena's framed wedding photo sat on a table below the stage, while guests clinked champagne in the soft light. Victor took the podium, his smile surgical, his tone humble. He spoke of resilience, of family, of the sanctity of life. The crowd applauded, as if absolution were a commodity he could buy. Halfway through his speech, just as he reached for the tear he planned to shed, the signal shifted. Sophia gave a single nod. The curated montage Victor's PR team had prepared vanished. On the massive screen behind him, raw footage rolled. A secret camera showing a violent exchange in a hallway, a close-up of Victor's hand striking, the image cut to photos of him with Alice at private hotels, then to bank transfers scrolling like an indictment. The final clip was a shaky hallway cam time-stamped the night Elena was assaulted. Victor's silhouette, the shove, Elena collapsing. Silence slammed into the room. Victor's smile froze. He lunged for the control, palms clumsy, but the feed had already been routed to every monitor and broadcast channel present. Phones rose, journalists started filming live. Clips hit social media in seconds. The murmur swelled into a roar. He reacted the only way he knew, with anger. He barked orders to security, tried to seize the screens, but hesitation rippled through his team. Some nodded at the footage, though some flinched as recognition flashed across faces that had once toasted him. The elites who had once praised him now wore the stunned masks of people watching a myth collapse. Mateo stood, voice steady and cold as iron when a microphone reached him. "This man hurt my sister," he said, each word a hammer strike. He beat her while she carried his child. He thought his money would bury the truth. The auditorium snapped to attention. Diego stepped forward, placing Elena's wedding portrait on the lectern as if to anchor the accusation with her face. Reporters rushed forward, shouting questions. Victor tried to pivot into denial. "These are doctored," but the streams continued to roll. Emails, receipts, timestamps, witness testimonies. The feeds were now everywhere, live, uneditable, and impossible to ignore. Outside, police vehicles approached, sirens rising above the clamor. Inside, guests who had smiled beside Victor now demanded answers. Sponsors who relied on reputations began to distance themselves in real time. The network executives on the press risers exchanged urgent texts. Social media trended the scandal within minutes. The public trap had snapped shut. It was surgical and merciless, the kind of exposure that humiliates in public and isolates in private. Victor's empire of adoration began to fracture in front of thousands, then millions online. He barked orders, tried to marshal his supporters, but the moment had passed. The mask slipped, and underneath, the man everyone once admired looked small and naked in his guilt. For Elena's brothers, the event was a turning point. It was not vengeance complete. There would be legal tides and personal storms ahead, but it was the first time the city truly saw the monster behind the millionaire. And when the gala descended into shouting, questions, and the flashing of cameras chasing the family from the building, the Torres brothers realized their gamble had worked. The world's sympathy would no longer belong to Victor Hayes. The gala had ended in chaos. Reporters swarmed the exits, guests whispered like frightened children, and Victor Hayes was left scrambling to repair the damage. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the fury waiting for him in the shadows. It was past midnight when Victor finally staggered into his penthouse. His tie hung loose, his face glistened with sweat. He poured a double whiskey with shaky hands, trying to drown the humiliation of being exposed. "They'll forget," he muttered to himself. "This city forgets everything if you throw enough money at it." But a low voice answered from the darkness. "Not this time." Victor spun, nearly dropping his glass. Mateo Torres stepped out from the corner of the room, his broad frame cloaked in shadows, eyes blazing with controlled fury. "How did you get in here?" Victor demanded, his bravado faltering. He reached for his phone, but Mateo's boot kicked it out of his hand, sending it skittering across the marble floor. "This is my house," Victor shouted, though his voice cracked. "Do you know who I am?" Mateo advanced slowly, his voice steady and lethal. "I know exactly who you are. You're the man who put my sister in a coma. You're the man who thought he could bury the truth with money. But you made one mistake, Victor. You didn't kill her family." Victor sneered, trying to recover his arrogance. "You think you scare me? I own this city. I own the judges, the cops, the media. You're nothing but a soldier who came back from war to play hero in a place that doesn't want you." Mateo leaned closer, his face inches from Victor's. "I don't want this city. I want you. And trust me, I've ended men who were more dangerous than you'll ever be." For the first time, fear flickered across Victor's eyes. He backed toward the liquor cabinet, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. But Mateo moved faster, slamming him against the wall with one arm pressed hard against his chest. "You're going to pay for every bruise, every tear, every scream she made while carrying your child," Mateo growled. "And I won't stop until you lose everything. Your name, your money, your freedom." Victor tried to spit back. "You're threatening me in my own home? You'll regret this. I'll bury you and your brother, your mother too. None of you are safe." That was the wrong move. Mateo's fist connected with Victor's jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor. The millionaire clutched his face, groaning in rage and humiliation. Mateo stood over him, fists trembling with restraint. He could end it right there, but he forced himself to pull back. This wasn't about vengeance in the shadows, it was about justice in the light. He crouched down, his voice low and venomous. "You don't understand, Victor. This isn't just about me or Diego or even Elena. The city is watching now, and when we're done, you won't just be hated, you'll be forgotten. A rich nobody, rotting in a cell." Mateo turned and walked to the door, leaving Victor gasping on the floor. But before leaving, he glanced back one last time. "Enjoy your drink, Hayes. It's the last night you'll taste freedom." The door slammed shut. Victor sat in silence, clutching his bruised jaw, his empire collapsing around him. For the first time, the walls of his penthouse felt like a prison. And in the shadows of New York, a war between brothers and a millionaire had shifted. The hunter was no longer Victor Hayes. The hospital room had become both sanctuary and prison. For weeks, the Torres family lived inside its sterile walls, holding on to hope that seemed to fade a little more each day. Machines beeped rhythmically, nurses slipped in and out, and Elena remained trapped in silence, her body still but her presence undeniable. Diego often sat by her bedside after his shifts, his head bowed, exhaustion tugging at his bones. Sometimes he read aloud from her favorite poetry book. Sometimes he just talked about their childhood, the summers at the lake, the smell of their mother's cooking, the way she used to hum lullabies without realizing it. He spoke to her as if she could hear, because a part of him believed she could. Mateo was different. He rarely spoke in the room. Instead, he stood like a soldier on guard, watching the door, as if Victor himself might storm in at any moment to finish what he had started. But every night, when no one was watching, Mateo would rest his calloused hand on his sister's and whisper the same vow. "Wake up, Lena. Please. I need you to see him fall." One evening, the room was bathed in the pale glow of the city's lights filtering through the blinds. Rosa prayed softly in the corner, her rosary beads slipping between her fingers. Diego was adjusting the monitors, checking her vitals, when something shifted. It was small, so small he almost missed it. Elena's finger twitched. His heart leapt. "Mama? Mateo." Diego's voice cracked as he leaned closer, gripping her hand. "Elena, can you hear me?" Mateo rushed to the bedside, his hardened exterior breaking in an instant. "Do it again, Lena. Show us you're here." Her eyelids fluttered, just a fraction. But it was enough to send a wave of electricity through the room. Rosa gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. The machines beeped faster as her vitals shifted, stabilizing slightly. Diego's professional side kicked in, but his voice shook with awe. "This isn't reflex. She's trying. She's fighting her way back." Mateo knelt beside the bed, his forehead nearly touching her hand. "That's it, Hermana. Come back to us. Come back and see your son." His voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't a miracle recovery. The doctors cautioned that it could be days or weeks before Elena fully woke, that she was still fragile, that the danger wasn't over. But to the Torres family, it was hope, real, tangible hope, for the first time since the attack. That night, Mateo and Diego stood outside the hospital under the dim streetlights, the cool air sharp against their faces. Diego exhaled shakily. If she wakes, she'll remember everything, every detail of what he did. Mateo's eyes hardened. Good. The world needs to hear it from her. Not just evidence, not just papers, her voice, her truth. Diego nodded, but concern lingered in his gaze. Victor will panic. He knows if Elena wakes, his empire is finished. He'll come after us harder. Mateo's lips curved into a grim smile. Then let him come. He has no idea what's waiting for him. Above them, the hospital windows glowed softly, a beacon in the dark. Inside, Elena's chest rose and fell, her body weak but her spirit clawing its way back. For the first time, the Torres brothers felt the tide turning, not just because they were fighting for her, but because she was starting to fight her way back to them. And that flicker of hope would soon become Victor Hayes's greatest fear. Alice Carter had always thought she understood the game. Young, beautiful, ambitious, she knew exactly what it meant to be the mistress of a powerful man. Expensive gifts, luxurious dinners, whispered promises that he would leave his wife one day. She told herself she wasn't just another accessory, that Victor Hayes really loved her. But as the city turned against him, Alice began to see the truth. She wasn't his partner. She was his shield, his distraction, his toy. In the days after the gala scandal, Alice noticed a change in Victor. His temper, once carefully hidden, now exploded without warning. He snapped at her, shoved her aside when she asked questions, barked orders like she was staff. The man who once whispered affection now hissed threats. "You don't speak to anyone," he warned, jabbing a finger at her chest. "If you open your mouth, you'll regret it." But Alice wasn't blind. She had seen the bruises on Elena before. She had watched Victor lose control at parties, gripping her arm too tightly, his face twisted with rage when he thought no one was looking. And now, She was terrified he might do the same to her. One night, while Victor was locked in his study making frantic calls, Alice scrolled through his laptop. What she found made her blood run cold. Secret accounts, offshore transfers, documents that proved he had bribed police officers to bury Elena's abuse reports. Her hands shook as she copied the files onto a flash drive, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The next day, she reached out to Sophia Carter, Elena's friend and attorney. The two women met in the back corner of a quiet cafe, Alice wearing oversized sunglasses, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how far it had gone," Alice whispered, sliding the flash drive across the table. I thought he just needed me. But he's dangerous. He'll destroy anyone who gets in his way." Sophia eyed her carefully. "Why are you giving me this now?" Alice's lips quivered. "Because if Elena wakes up, he'll kill her, and maybe me too. I can't do this anymore." Tears slipped down her cheeks, smudging her mascara. "I want out." Sophia placed a hand over hers. "Then help us finish him. With this, we can prove not just the abuse, but the corruption behind it. But betrayal comes at a cost." That evening, Victor confronted Alice. His informants had tipped him off about her meeting. She barely had time to lock the door before he stormed into the apartment, his face dark with fury. "You stupid girl," he spat, slamming her against the wall. "You think you can betray me? You think anyone will protect you?" Alice's eyes filled with terror, but for the first time, she pushed back. "You can't control me anymore, Victor. The world knows what you are." Victor's grip tightened around her throat, rage radiating from every muscle. "The world may whisper," he hissed, "but I'll make sure they never hear from you again." She choked, clawing at his hand until headlights flashed through the window, Mateo's car pulling up outside. Startled, Victor released her and stormed out the back door, disappearing into the night before Mateo could reach the apartment. Alice collapsed on the floor, gasping, clutching her bruised throat. Mateo rushed to her side, fury etched into his face. "He'll kill you if you stay," he growled. Through trembling lips, Alice whispered, "Then help me finish him." And with that, the mistress who once shielded Victor Hayes became his greatest liability. The woman whose betrayal could finally bring him to ruin. The morning after Alice's narrow escape, New York woke up to headlines that rattled its foundations. Independent media outlets had started publishing leaks from the flash drive she gave Sophia. It wasn't just gossip now, it was hard proof. Secret bank transfers, bribes to law enforcement, offshore accounts tied to Victor Hayes' name. The city trembled with outrage. News anchors spoke with uncharacteristic venom. How deep does Victor Hayes' corruption go? One demanded on live television, is the millionaire who paraded himself as a grieving husband nothing more than a criminal in disguise? Mateo watched the broadcasts from the hospital cafeteria, arms crossed, jaw set. Around him, strangers shook their heads at the TV screens, muttering curses at Victor's name. For the first time, the tide of public opinion was shifting fast and hard. But victory never comes without consequence. That night, as Sophia finalized legal briefs to deliver to federal prosecutors, her office windows shattered. Masked men stormed in, destroying computers, tearing files apart. She barely escaped by ducking into the stairwell as Mateo arrived, fists and fury, fighting two attackers until they fled into the night. Victor had struck back. Meanwhile, Diego stayed with Elena in the hospital. He noticed extra security guards in the hallways, their uniforms too crisp, their eyes too sharp. They weren't hospital staff. They were Victor's men, lurking, waiting. Diego confronted one, demanding to know why they were there. But the man only smirked. "Just making sure everyone's safe, Doc." The menace in his tone was unmistakable. Fear twisted Diego's gut. Victor wasn't just defending himself. He was preparing to silence Elena forever if she woke up. Back at the penthouse, Victor paced like a caged animal, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it costs," he hissed. "Find every journalist touching this story, shut them down. And if Alice thinks she can run, remind her who holds the power." He slammed the phone down, eyes burning with fury. But cracks spread faster than he could contain them. Protesters began gathering outside his building, chanting Elena's name, holding signs that read "Justice for Elena" and "No man above the law." Police cars lined the streets, not to protect him, but to control the anger boiling against him. The city was no longer Victor's playground. It had become his battlefield. Inside the hospital, Rosa clutched her rosary tighter, tears streaming down her face as she whispered prayers beside Elena's bed. "The city knows now, mi niña," she murmured. "The city fights with you." Diego stood guard, phone buzzing with updates from Sofia. Every new leak made Victor more dangerous, but also more desperate. "He's cornered," Diego told Mateo when his brother arrived. "But a cornered animal bites hardest." Mateo's reply was steady, his voice low like thunder. "Then we'll be sharper, stronger. This is no longer just our fight, it's the city's." Across town, cameras captured Alice being ushered into a federal safe house under heavy guard. She had crossed a line she couldn't return from, and Victor would stop at nothing to silence her. But for once, she wasn't alone. She had chosen her side, the side of truth. That night, New York didn't sleep. The city trembled with tension, waiting for the next move. And while Victor plotted in shadows, the Torres brothers stood ready. Because when the city itself turns against a tyrant, not even a millionaire's empire can hold. The city's roar grew louder every day, and Victor Hayes felt his grip slipping. Protesters lined the sidewalks near his penthouse. News outlets no longer echoed his denials, but dissected his lies. His empire, once untouchable, was cracking. And cracks make dangerous men desperate. Victor decided that if he couldn't crush Mateo head-on, he would strike at the brother who embodied compassion, the one who healed rather than fought. Diego Torres. It happened on a Thursday evening. Diego had just finished his shift at the hospital, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, when he stepped into the dimly lit parking garage. His phone buzzed with a text from Mateo. "Stay sharp. He'll come after us soon." Diego typed back quickly, "Don't worry. Heading home now." He never saw the van until it screeched to a halt beside him. Masked men spilled out, the metallic glint of pipes and bats catching the fluorescent light. Diego barely had time to throw his bag aside before the first blow landed across his ribs. Pain shot through his chest as he staggered backward, adrenaline flooding his veins. "Send him a message," one of the attackers snarled. Diego fought back, years of training in emergency wards giving him a surprising resilience. He ducked, landed a punch on one assailant's jaw, but there were too many. A pipe crashed against his shoulder, another against his knee. He hit the ground hard, gasping, blood pooling at his lip. But even beaten, he spat out the words, "Tell Victor. He'll pay for this." The attackers didn't reply. They left him broken on the concrete, disappearing into the night. Hours later, Mateo burst into the ER as nurses worked frantically over his brother. His stomach twisted at the sight of Diego, face bruised, ribs fractured, his arm hanging limp. But Diego's eyes flicked open when Mateo leaned over him, and through cracked lips he whispered, "I'm still here." Rage like fire roared inside Mateo. He turned on his heel, fist shaking, his voice raw. "This is it. He wants war? I'll give him war." Sofia arrived minutes later, her eyes wide with fury as she took in Diego's condition. "Victor ordered this. I'll get the police." Mateo cut her off, his voice steel. "No. The police won't protect us. He owns too many of them. This ends with us." Diego coughed, forcing himself to sit despite the agony ripping through his body. His voice was hoarse but unyielding. "Don't let him win. Don't let him think he broke us. I can still fight, in my way." Mateo gripped his brother's hand, his voice breaking. "You've already fought enough. Rest now. Let me carry this." Tears welled in Rosa's eyes as she entered the room, clutching her rosary so tightly the beads cut into her palms. She kissed Diego's forehead, whispering prayers, while Mateo stood rigid at the window, staring into the night. His soldier's instincts sharpened into something more primal. Victor had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Later that night, Mateo sat beside Diego's hospital bed. The machines beeped steadily, echoing the ones in Elena's room just floors above. His family was suffering, broken, yet still breathing. He closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness. "He tried to take you both. He failed. And now I swear on everything I have left, Victor Hayes will never lay his hands on anyone we love again." The millionaire had escalated the fight, but he didn't realize that every wound he inflicted only forged the Torres brothers' resolve into steel. And steel, once sharpened, cuts clean. The hospital was quiet that night, its long hallways bathed in pale fluorescent light. Mateo walked with heavy steps, his boots echoing faintly on the linoleum floor. He had just come from Diego's room, where his younger brother lay battered and bruised, his body wrapped in bandages. The image haunted him. Diego, the healer, struck down by the cruelty of a man who thought himself untouchable. But Mateo wasn't heading home. His path led him to Elena's room. He paused at the doorway, hand resting on the frame, staring at his sister. She lay still, her face pale under the soft glow of the monitors, tubes running across her fragile form. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a fragile miracle. For a moment, the soldier who had faced death on battlefields thousands of miles away felt powerless. He stepped closer, dragging a chair to her bedside. He sat heavily, elbows resting on his knees, his large hands covering his face. For the first time in years, the indomitable Marine let himself cry. His shoulders shook, silent sobs racking his body as he whispered her name. "Elena?" His voice broke. He took her limp hand in his, pressing it to his forehead. "I was supposed to protect you. I was supposed to keep you safe, and I failed." Tears fell freely now, dotting the white hospital sheets. He gritted his teeth, forcing the words out. "He hurt you. He almost killed you. And then he came for Diego. He thinks he can destroy us one by one." Mateo leaned closer, his voice trembling with both grief and rage. "I can't let that happen, Lena. I can't stand by while he takes everything from us. I swore to defend this family with my life, and I mean it. If the law won't punish him, I will. If the world is blind to his crimes, then I'll rip the blindfold off myself." His tears blurred his vision, but he didn't stop. His grip on her hand tightened. "If you don't wake up, if you can't see justice done with your own eyes, then I'll make sure your son grows up knowing his father was a coward, a monster, and nothing more. I'll make sure he grows up proud of his mother, proud of the woman who fought even when she couldn't stand." For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the machines. Then, as if in answer, Elena's fingers twitched faintly in his hand. Mateo froze, his breath catching. He looked up at her face, hope flooding through his veins. "Lena, was that you?" Her eyelids fluttered just for a second before stilling again. It wasn't much, but to Mateo it was everything. He bent his head, pressing a kiss to her hand, tears streaming down his face. "You're still fighting. I can feel it, and I swear to you, so am I. We'll fight together. You, me, Diego. We'll end him." Mateo sat with her for hours, his hand never leaving hers. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the hum of machines, something inside him hardened. The grief, the guilt, the pain, they all crystallized into resolve. When he finally rose, his eyes were no longer clouded with tears. They burned with fire. He looked at his sister one last time and whispered, "Sleep for now, Lena. When you wake, Victor Hayes will already be gone." That night, a brother's vow became a battle cry, and from that breaking point, there was no turning back. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the hospital room. The world outside bustled with noise, but inside, silence ruled, broken only by the steady rhythm of machines keeping Elena alive. Rosa dozed in a chair, her rosary clutched tightly in her hands. Diego slept against the wall, exhaustion weighing on him. Mateo, as always, stood by the window like a sentinel, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon. Then it happened. A soft, strangled sound broke the stillness. At first, Mateo thought it was the machine glitching, but when he turned, his heart nearly stopped. Elena's lips were moving. "Mateo?" Her voice was hoarse, a faint whisper dragged from the depths of suffering, but it was hers. Mateo's chair screeched back as he rushed to her side, his hand gripping hers. "Lena, I'm here, I'm here." Diego jolted awake, his eyes wide. He stumbled to the bed, checking her vitals, his hands shaking. "Her levels are rising. This is real. She's waking." Elena's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Her gaze was unfocused at first, swimming with pain and confusion. But then she saw them, her brothers, their faces etched with tears and relief. Rosa cried out, falling to her knees in prayer. "Gracias a Dios, my baby girl is back." Mateo pressed her hand to his lips, his voice breaking. "You're safe now, Lena. You're safe." But Elena's eyes filled with tears, and her lips trembled. "No." She rasped, each word scraped raw. "The baby." The room froze. Diego bent closer, his voice soft. "The baby's still fighting. He's alive, Lena. He's waiting for you." Her tears spilled freely, a mix of agony and fragile hope. Her hand moved slowly, trembling toward her stomach, as if needing confirmation. When she felt the faint swell beneath the sheets, her lips parted in a sob. "My son." Mateo's throat tightened. He brushed her hair gently from her forehead. "Yes, he's waiting for you. And we're here, always. But then her expression changed. Her eyes, weak but sharp, locked onto Mateo's. Fear flared in them, urgent and raw. She struggled to form words, her voice almost a breath. He tried before. The night, her chest heaved with effort. Victor, he wanted the baby gone. He said he'd make sure. The brothers stiffened. This wasn't just a beating. This was attempted murder. Diego's fists clenched, his face pale. He meant to kill her and the child. Mateo's fury ignited, his hand gripping the bedrail. Then this ends now. Not just for what he did to you, Lena, but for what he tried to do to your son. Elena's eyes closed briefly, tears slipping down her cheeks. When they opened again, they burned with a fragile but fierce resolve. Don't let him touch my baby. Mateo leaned close, his voice steady as iron. I swear, Lena, he'll never come near you or your son again. The monitors beeped steadily, her vitals stabilizing, her body beginning its climb back towards strength. For the first time, hope filled the room. Not the fragile hope of before, but a burning one, fueled by her words. Elena was no longer just a victim. She was a witness, and her truth was the weapon they had been waiting for. As Mateo and Diego stepped into the hallway, their faces hardened with new purpose. The twist of fate had arrived. Not only had Elena survived, she had returned with the testimony that would destroy Victor Hayes. And with her first words, the war transformed. It was no longer brothers against a millionaire. It was a family, united, ready to burn his empire to the ground. The Torres family had endured weeks of pain, fear, and loss, but with Elena awake, everything shifted. She was weak, her body still bruised, but her voice carried the power of truth. And truth, Sophia reminded them, was stronger than any weapon Victor Hayes possessed. In Sophia's office, the team gathered like generals before a battle. Stacks of documents covered the desk, bank records, police reports, photographs, and the flash drive Alice had risked her life to steal. But the crown jewel was Elena herself. Her testimony. With her voice trembling but steady, Elena recounted everything. The nights of abuse, the bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, the threats Victor whispered when no one was listening. Tears streaked down her face as she spoke of the final night, of the fists, the marble counter, the collapse into darkness. But when she described his words, "That baby won't save you," the room fell silent. Diego's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Mateo's fists balled at his sides, fury radiating off him. But they didn't interrupt. They let her speak, let her truth pour out. When she finished, Sophia leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "This is it," Sophia said. "This is the nail in his coffin. With your testimony, Lena, combined with the financial crimes and Alice's statement, Victor can't hide anymore. We'll take this to the DA, and we'll take it to the media. We'll choke him from both sides until he has no escape." But they knew Victor would not surrender quietly. Sure enough, within hours of Sophia's first calls, Victor's lawyers tried to strike back. They filed motions to block evidence, to paint Elena as unstable, a woman prone to hysteria who fabricated abuse for sympathy. It was his oldest weapon, discredit the victim. But this time, Elena wasn't alone. Sophia held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Elena appeared, frail but unbroken, standing between her brothers. Cameras flashed wildly as she spoke into the microphones, her voice fragile yet unshakable. "My name is Elena Hayes," she began, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "For years I suffered in silence. I was beaten, humiliated, and nearly killed by the man the world believes is a saint. But I survived, and I won't stay silent anymore. Not for myself, not for my son." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs lit up the night. And then Sophia stepped forward, holding up a thick folder. "These," she declared, her voice strong, "are financial records proving years of corruption, laundering, and bribery. These are the police reports buried by Victor's money. And this," she held up a flash drive, "is evidence from his own mistress, showing his crimes in full detail." The courthouse erupted in chaos. Reporters pushed forward, demanding answers. Live feeds broadcast Elena's trembling face across the city. The image of the silent, dutiful wife was gone. In its place stood a survivor, a fighter, a mother who refused to let her child grow up under a shadow of lies. At his penthouse, Victor hurled a glass at the wall as he watched the broadcast. Rage consumed him. His empire was unraveling in real time, and for the first time, he was powerless to stop it. His threats, his money, his carefully polished mask, none of it mattered against the raw power of truth. Meanwhile, Matteo stood behind Elena as the cameras swarmed. His hand rested on her shoulder, his gaze locked on the crowd. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The message was clear. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice. And with the evidence unleashed, the city no longer trembled for Victor Hayes. It trembled for what was coming to him. The courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters hunched over their notepads, microphones angled toward the front. Outside, protesters filled the streets, chanting Elena's name, demanding justice. For weeks, the city had watched the scandal unfold. Now, they would witness its climax. Victor Hayes entered flanked by his lawyers, his suit pressed, his smile forced. He tried to carry himself like the man who once commanded admiration, but the whispers followed him. Monster. Coward. Abuser. He clenched his jaw, refusing to meet the eyes of the crowd. At the prosecution table sat Elena, fragile but fierce. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale yet determined. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. Beside her sat Diego, his arm in a sling, but his gaze steady, and Matteo, his broad frame radiating silent strength. Sophia stood in front, her eyes sharp as steel. The judge called for silence, and the trial began. Victor's lawyers attacked quickly. They painted Elena as unstable, a woman inventing lies to ruin her husband. They waved documents, twisted words, and tried to turn sympathy back in his favor. "This is the story of a bitter wife," one attorney sneered, "seeking revenge against a man who has given everything to this city." But when it was Sophia's turn, she rose calmly and walked to the center. "This is not a story of bitterness," she said, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "This is a story of survival. A woman beaten, silenced, and nearly killed by the man who vowed to love her." She turned to Elena. "Mrs. Hayes, please tell the court what happened." The room held its breath as Elena took the stand. Her voice shook at first, but with every word it grew steadier. She spoke of the first slap, the first bruise, the long nights of fear. She told them about the final night, the fists, the counter, the fall into darkness, and the words Victor had spat as he struck her. "That baby won't save you." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. The cameras zoomed in on Victor's face, his composure cracking. Then Sophia unveiled the evidence. The financial records, the police reports buried under bribes, the photos of Victor with Alice, and finally Alice's sworn testimony. One by one, the lies shattered under the weight of truth. Victor tried to lash out, standing suddenly, his voice thundering. "This is all fake, a conspiracy." But his words sounded hollow. The judge's gavel slammed down, demanding order, while the public gallery erupted in shouts. Matteo rose slowly, his eyes locked on Victor. Though he said nothing, his presence was louder than words. Diego, battered but unbroken, sat beside Elena, his hand covering hers, steadying her. Together, they were a wall Victor could not break. When the final video played, grainy footage from the night of the attack, showing Victor's silhouette shoving Elena, silence fell heavy. There was no denying it now. No amount of money, power, or performance could erase what the world had just seen. The jury didn't take long. "Guilty," the foreman declared. The word rang like thunder. The gallery erupted. Cheers, tears, reporters rushing for the door. Outside, the crowd roared, the chant of justice for Elena shaking the courthouse steps. Victor Hayes' face crumpled, his mask finally shattered. The millionaire who once believed himself untouchable was led away in handcuffs, his empire collapsing behind him. Elena exhaled shakily, tears streaming down her cheeks. Matteo placed a protective arm around her, while Diego whispered, "It's over, Elena. He can't hurt you anymore." But Matteo's eyes stayed on the doors where Victor had been taken. His voice was low, certain. "No, it's not just over, it's finished." And in that moment, in front of the city, the Torres family reclaimed what Victor tried to steal: their dignity, their strength, and their justice. The trial was over. The gavel had fallen. Victor Hayes, once the untouchable millionaire who ruled Manhattan with money and fear, was sentenced to decades behind bars. His empire was dismantled piece by piece, properties seized, accounts frozen, allies scattering like rats from a sinking ship. For the first time, the city no longer trembled at his name. It pitied him. It despised him. But for the Torres family, the victory was not just legal. It was deeply, painfully personal. The day after the verdict, Elena was wheeled out of the hospital into the sunlight for the first time in months. The autumn air was crisp, the sky impossibly blue. She closed her eyes and breathed it in, tears slipping down her cheeks. Mateo pushed her wheelchair, Diego walking beside her, their mother clutching her hand. For the first time since the nightmare began, they felt something they thought they'd lost forever. Peace. Weeks later, Elena stood on her own 2 feet again. Her body still carried scars, her spirit still trembled at night, but each day she grew stronger. She spent hours talking to her unborn son, rubbing her belly as she whispered lullabies. Her brothers often found her by the window, her voice soft but certain. You will never know fear. You will only know love. When the baby was born, a healthy boy with wide, curious eyes, tears flooded the room. Rosa held her grandson first, whispering prayers of gratitude, while Diego checked his vitals with a trembling smile. Mateo, silent as always, finally let a single tear fall as he cradled the child in his arms. He'll grow up knowing his mother is the strongest woman alive, he said. Elena named him Gabriel, after the angel who brings messages of hope. The months that followed were not easy. Healing never is. There were nights when Elena woke screaming, flashes of Victor's fists haunting her dreams. There were moments Diego broke down quietly, guilt gnawing at him for not protecting her sooner. There were days Mateo's anger nearly consumed him. But each time they came back together. They reminded one another that survival was not weakness, it was victory. One evening they gathered at the small family home they hadn't shared in years. The air smelled of Rosa's cooking, laughter filled the rooms, and Gabriel's cries mixed with warmth instead of fear. Sophia joined them too, raising a glass of wine. To Elena she toasted, her voice steady, for her courage, to Diego for his heart, to Mateo for his strength, and to a family who showed a city that no man, no matter how rich, can bury the truth forever. Glasses clinked, tears shone. For a moment the world felt whole. Later, after the meal, Mateo stepped outside with Diego, watching the city skyline glow against the night. Do you think it's really over? Diego asked quietly. Mateo took a long breath. For us, yes. For Victor, it's only beginning. He'll rot in a cell, stripped of everything he thought made him powerful, and every day he wakes up there, he'll remember the family he couldn't break. Diego nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. And every day we wake up here, we'll remember that we won. Behind them, Elena stood in the doorway, Gabriel in her arms. Her silhouette glowed softly in the light, her smile fragile but radiant. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Mateo turned to her, his voice thick with emotion. He'll grow up free, Lena, because of you. Elena kissed her son's forehead, her eyes shining, because of us. And so the story ended, not with revenge, but with healing. A family broken by violence, rebuilt by love. A city shaken by lies, redeemed by truth. And a woman once silenced, now stronger than ever. Her voice, her child, and her family, the legacy Victor Hayes could never destroy. So that's how the story ends. My friends, you're still here with me, aren't you? If you've made it this far, something in this journey touched your heart. Maybe it was Elena's courage, maybe the brothers' loyalty, or maybe the reminder that no matter how dark things get, light always finds its way back. This isn't just a drama, it's life. We all carry battles others don't see. Sometimes the people we trust betray us. Sometimes the world looks away when we cry for help. But as Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Elena found hers, her family found theirs, and so can you. The lesson? Violence never wins, lies eventually collapse, but love, truth, and resilience, those are unbreakable. No matter what you're facing right now, remember your scars don't define you, they refine you. If this story moved you, I'd love for you to hit that like button, share it with someone who might need hope tonight, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remind each other of the strength we all carry inside.